Remember, Damian, there's more to the Batman legacy than being Batman. I should know.
Batman Brave and the Bold does fan fiction, and no, I don't mean that as a pejorative, which is how many mean it when they invoke that term and concept. No, instead, this episode's an ode to what it can be when it's well done. It's also just a loving tribute to the generational legacy of Batman, which isn't always allowed to manifest inside of the comic canon itself, and so this is a fun way to do it. Now, Batman has a very large history as well as legacy. There's a lot to draw from, different timelines, adaptations, weddings, and not weddings, and more. This episode manages to weave several moments in canon and adaptation into one heartfelt episode. It's a good time, but it may fly a bit under the radar in some cases because a lot of what it does is so seamless and so simple, but when you do simple, there's nowhere to hide. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and we're going to be taking a look at the Batman Brave and the Bold episode, Knights of Tomorrow.
Who knows? Someday you may end up in this museum, Damian.
Intimidating much, Dad?
Knights of Tomorrow was the 23rd episode of the second season of Batman the Brave and the Bold. It originally aired November 19th, 2010. It was written by Todd Casey and Jake Black, Jake not Jack, and directed by Michael Chang. The opening teaser is part of an ongoing Darkseid plot, which is taking place exclusively inside the teasers, and it does not pertain to our main story. It's fun though, and as implausible as it is to see the Question take on parademons by punching them, it's a good time.
Will you face them or fry? Good question.
As for our main episode, which is what we're going to be focusing on, we're opening on a narration of how Gotham was a cesspool of crime and corruption until the Batman showed up. Golden Age Batman to be precise, with the slightly longer ears. The ones that managed to stay upright in comic design because you can do that with the art, but fall down spectacularly in the theater serials. Batman very quickly has a montage of criminals from the Golden Age, the standard gangster fare, and some supervillains who debuted in the 40s, such as the Riddler and Solomon Grundy. Quite quickly, he takes on a sidekick, in the form of an animated rendition of the cover for Detective Comics 38, where Robin first debuted back in 1940. Just like this opening narration states, Robin did appear quite quickly or early on in Batman's mythos, as the Dark Knight himself had just debuted in Detective Comics 27. So he wasn't alone for very long. He works alone, except very quickly he took on a child sidekick. They then spin this into a recreation of the 60s TV series intro. They shake hands for so long in this sequence that it goes round the bend from being awkward to amusing. We're gonna come back to some of those people being punched. Put a pin in it. As time goes on, Dick becomes Nightwing and is off. And here's where the episode starts to diverge. Here's where our alternate universe canon starts to come into play. Up to this point, everything was the same as the mainline verse. In a battle with his arch nemesis, the Joker dies by falling into some water because his hand was a trick hand and it just slips off as Batman tries to save him.
Who ultimately brought about his own demise.
Falling in water is quite a common Joker fake-out death. In fact, the Joker seemingly dying but then not is a classic Joker staple, which happened in his very first appearance in Batman #1. Well, his second appearance, because he appeared twice in Batman #1. This in the year 1940. The character was supposed to die, or rather Bill Finger wanted him to die, because he felt that if the villain didn't die, then Batman wouldn't be effective. But he was overruled by editor Whitney Ellsworth, which ended up being a good decision in the long run, even if they do overuse the Joker these days time recording. And so they hastily had to draw in an extra panel to show that he was alive. Getting stabbed in the heart, no problem. But no, in this episode, he's dead for realsies. The amount of not caring on Batman's face is legendary. For him, it was Tuesday. He goes straight to Catwoman to seek out a relationship, mirroring the progress of their relationship on the Golden Age Earth, which led to marriage and then children. For a time, they fight crime as a duo. The couple that punches Professor Hugo Strange together stays together. Oh, isn't that sweet? It'd be a shame if a wedding were to be teased and not happen. I know, it's old news. It's still funny though. I find it funny. Other people do not find it funny. I heard that shops actually were encouraged to order cakes and stuff, and then it didn't happen. If that happened, that's really not funny. Now in our episode, the two get married in a scene that is reminiscent of their Earth 2 wedding in DC Superstar 17 from 1977. In the story, The Secret Origin of the Huntress. And look, superheroes getting married in civilian clothing. Will this start a trend? A lot of times in superhero comics, they get married in their costumes, which always amuses me. You also see this wedding in Superman Family 211 in 1981, which is a happier story than the Huntress origin. For Helena's catalyst into fighting crime is the death of one of her parents. I mean, why wouldn't it be? There are a lot of familiar faces at this wedding, like Clark and Lois, Commissioner Gordon, Oliver Queen, Dinah Lance. Now, trivia pages will vacillate on saying there are or aren't more people. Those people I can confirm. The point is, people came, they saw, they cameoed. Now, after the marriage, Batman retires, passing the mantle on to Nightwing, who then becomes Batman, which is something that has happened a few times. Now, Bruce and Selina have a son, Damian Wayne.
Little Damian.
This, of course, is a change from the comic book, for there, on Earth 2, their child was Helena Wayne, the Huntress, and Damian Wayne was a child of Bruce and Talia. First introduced in the story Batman, Son of the Demon, and then kind of disappearing from continuity, and then being brought back with inaccurate information that had to be retconned. It seems the choice has been made here to keep it with Catwoman just to simplify all of that, and because Talia wasn't someone who was overly utilized in the series and not necessarily in the capacity of being Bruce Wayne's love interest.
Taking over the family business is my destiny. I intend to claim it. I suggest you do the same.
They very much stuck classic Silver Age route with that, with Catwoman. Talia came in the Bronze Age later on. Now, another reason why this is Damian and not Helena seems to be a theme that is being worked through in this story, which is fathers and sons. And also, Damian is about to take on attributes of every male Robin who isn't Dick. And so if you use Damian, then you can pull from all those other canons, which you can't if you use Helena. Or you could, but it would be different. It wouldn't hit the same. For example, we get a montage of him being trained, which is very reminiscent of the training undergone by Jason Todd post-Crisis, as seen in Batman 410 in 1987. After Bruce has taken Jason in, he's seen teaching him martial arts and science, and how to handle firearms properly, because it's important to know how to handle them even if you won't be using them. But we can't show that on the show, so enjoy this training with batarangs instead. So Damian has been brought up to be Batman, trained, but there's just one problem. He doesn't wanna.
Could I finish junior high before you put a cape on me?
As you see, the Waynes are on a nice trip to the Batman Museum, which can only end well. Kidding. This is where his origin starts.
If this museum shows me anything, it's that the world will always need a Batman.
This museum is crashed by the Joker's son. See? Fathers and sons. No, not anarchy. That was an accident. Side note, the voice acting in this episode is top-notch in terms of casting. Everybody sounds like they could be the next generation of the hero whose mantle they're taking on, or the villain.
After all, I am the Joker's son.
Bruce springs into action, but he's not quite as spry as he used to be. And while Selena also leaps in to help, Damian wants nothing to do with this. Why can't he just be a scientist or a race car driver?
What about a race car driver?
The Batmobile is the fastest car on the planet.
Interestingly, when Batman, Dick, shows up, the theme transitions from what is usually that jazzy Silver Age vibe utilized in the show to a Batman Beyond style electro rock sting. This cements Dick as Batman of the future, which is also what Batman Beyond was called in certain parts of Europe. It gives the whole sequence a kind of Batman Beyond Return of the Joker vibe to it.
We haven't met, Junior. I'm Batman.
Dick's Batman costume has some 90s animated costume vibes, but a bit grittier. He showed up just in time for Bruce and Selena to die, R.I.P., because Damian needs motivation. He didn't wanna.
And so calamity struck the Wayne family once again.
Helena Wayne, as mentioned, was also inspired by the death of a family member. In her case, her mom, which we covered in a vid years ago on this channel. So Damian's arc is mirroring that in a way, but of course it's more obviously a parallel to the death of Bruce's own parents, continuing the idea that from tragedy one can wring some kind of purpose, that it can be turned around and made meaningful and potentially positive for others.
I don't know if I can live up to the Batman legacy, Dick. I don't know if I want to.
Now the funeral also has several prominent characters at it, and in a thing I find sweet, many of them were also at the wedding. They maintained those friendships. It's nice. We got Clark, Lois, Ollie, Dinah, Jaime Reyes, Blue Beetle. He grew a sweet goatee. Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor, Barbara Gordon, Alfred, who I first thought was Lucius, but is Commissioner Gordon, but in the first lighting it was giving Lucius. And then there's...
Wait a minute! Who are you?
Who is this? Help me. For some reason I'm blanking. Damian is still trying to figure out what to do with himself, what he wants to do when the Joker attacks. Joker Jr. I was calling him Joker too, but the episode's gonna call him Joker Jr. He's vandalizing Batman's memorial statue, the Fiend, which has also been turned into a giant Joker gas dispenser. The mouth will open, a big gun comes out of it. It's pretty intense. And then, la gasp, the original Joker, geriatric Joker, Joker OG, he's still alive. It's not shocking, unless you're Dick. No, what is shocking is that he waited this long. The episode plays with a couple of fun ideas here. One, the idea that the Joker knows who Batman is, but doesn't particularly care that much because that's not what he's interested in. That's not the fun part of Batman. So it's just additional info that he can utilize but chooses not to most of the time.
Oh, how'd I know? I'm crazy, not stupid, remember? But now that Bruce Wayne's gone, you'll have to do.
This episode also jokes about various ways that the Joker has died and then come back to life, such as falling to shark-infested waters, exploding, chimneys, which are all things that happen in the DCAU, some more than once, and of course in the comics. Side note, this Joker Jr. is not the Joker's actual son, but someone he was able to mold into insanity, which also has strong Batman Beyond Return of the Joker vibes, in of which Harley kidnaps Tim Drake for the Joker so that he can do experiments on him and torture him until he becomes a little mini Joker.
I'll begin with how I peeled back the layers of the boy's mind.
This so that him and Harley can kind of have the perfect family. Harley's done some things. Now, as of 2018, there's a character called Joker Jr. who is also not the Joker's son. He's from the Adventures of Super Sons. There was also a Joker Jr. who went on a crime spree in Old Lady Harley in 2019. And I'm curious if some of this episode inspired that, maybe a teensy bit, but I may be reaching. That version really was the Joker's son, who Harley had given up at birth, and he was on a destructive crime spree to get back at his mom. Although most of the similarities there come from the name and some of the look, though that matches more with the geriatric Joker than with the spry Joker Jr. of this episode. Before the Joker can shoot Dick, Damian appears in Tim's Robin costume, the one that Tim debuted in, that is. This version of the costume first being seen in Batman 457 in 1990. In this moment, Damian is slotting into two roles. He's embodying Tim a bit and taking on the role of Robin by choice, seeking it out. He even says the famous line, "Batman needs a Robin," to Dick.
You think you're gonna stick with it?
Yep. Gotham needs a Batman, and Batman needs a Robin.
But at the same time, this dynamic of Dick Grayson Batman and Damian Wayne Robin had played out in the comics, this following Batman's death in Final Crisis. Also after Battle for the Cowl, in which Dick emerged as the winner/keeper of the cowl, this after beating his various siblings and other contenders. In the Batman and Robin series, helmed initially by Grant Morrison until issue 16, with a different artist per arc, the first artist being Frank Quitely, this run began in 2009 and went till 2011 and lasted 26 issues. And Dick and Damian were the dynamic duo. Bruce got better / had never died. He was traveling through time, as you do. So this episode is once more providing an excellent fusion of several concepts. The new dynamic duo managed to defeat the Jokers, and we get this pretty extreme shot of Joker getting shot with his own gas gun coming from the vandalized Batmouth, and then we get a new dynamic duo kicking butt montage. We will do a rundown of these villains at the end, because it's fun, and also, we don't want to get mired down here. It's gonna be a bit. As for Batman and Robin, the story continues, leading into the future, with Damian taking on the role of Batman with a new Robin, who has red hair, kind of like Carrie Kelly, or the original Jason Todd. And a fun behind the scenes fact is that the character was voiced by Batman voice actor Diedrich Bader's actual son. So that's a nice touch.
Only humans of justice, Dad.
The villains down at the bottom robbing Gotham Bank look like members of the mutant gang from Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns story from 1986, which featured a grizzled older Batman in a dark future Gotham. The rest of the sequence is an homage to the opening credits of the 90s animated Batman series. This suit, because it's so silver, it reminds me so much of the Batman and Robin era suit, but then the metallic accents are reminiscent of a less bulky version of a Dark Knight Returns armor, or a more silver Batman Justice armor. It kind of looks like it might be its own thing, but if I'm forgetting a suit that this clearly was referencing, let me know. Remember, it has to be pre-2010, because that's when this episode aired. That's your mission, should you choose to accept it. Now, as the new dynamic duo of the future fly away, we get our reveal. All of this was a story being written by Alfred in his first full appearance inside of Batman the Brave and the Bold. He's basically writing wish fulfillment fanfic about Bruce's life. This is amusing on many levels.
Catwoman is planning another feline-related felony.
That explains why your batsuit looks so nicely pressed.
It's clearly a device to facilitate being able to showcase all of this forward motion and play with characters and certain concepts that otherwise don't slot in as easily to this show, given its more backward silver-age looking focus a lot of the time. However, it's also really funny to think about, because not only is Alfred a busybody RP that's real person shipper, as he tries to get Batman to ask Catwoman out,
You know, she could make quite the Mrs. Wayne someday.
but he's also writing a grim dark future fic where Bruce and Selena die so that their son can become Batman eventually. Alfred is working through some things in this story. I also got a chuckle out of the secret child trope coming up with Joker Jr. It's usually a secret daughter, so Alfred is bucking trends by having it be a son. It's so we can keep the father-son theme going. Do you think that Bruce is ever tempted to take a look at this tome, which is called Knights of Tomorrow? Alfred told him it was a detective story he was writing, which is a nice callback to classic Alfred, who would often approach helping Batman like he was trying to solve a mystery. There were Sherlock Holmes vibes. He had a deerstalker hat and everything. What would Bruce think if he read this? What would you think if you found some elaborate fan fiction that somebody had written about your life? That'd be uncomfortable. And now, before we get the wrap up, as promised, the people getting punched information. Now, in the 60s inspired opening montage, it's a bit more difficult, or at least I found it so. For example, the pirate, some say it's Captain Stingery, but I don't think so. It doesn't look the same. He's not bald. There's no eye patch. There's a lot of differences. For me, it seemed like these were more generic versions of villains that they fought, but I did find a couple that it might be referencing, so I'll throw them out here. This pirate reminded me of the pirates from Batman #4, which I thought of because that was the first issue where they made a big deal about the fact that Batman didn't kill. These last two I was less certain of because a lot of villains had looks like this, at least in the early 40s, which is where I went back to and went 20 issues forward for both Batman and Detective Comics and couldn't find anything definitive, but they may be there. Now on to the ones that I am sure of. We have Charlie Caligula, or Carlo Calzone, from during the Damian and Dick punching montage. He debuted during the Morrison Batman era, which is where everybody from this scene is going to come from. This in Batman 676 in 2008. In that same pan, we have Professor Pig, who is from the first issue of Batman and Robin from 2009, again by Morrison. And beside him is Flamingo, Eduardo Flamingo, who debuted in that same Batman and Robin run in issue #5. He was also known as the Eater of Faces because he's a cannibal. There's lots of body horror and mutilation style villains introduced in that run. We also have Piero Lunaire, who debuted in the same issue as Charlie Caligula, aka Carlo Calzone. Okay, side note, as fun as it is to say Carlo Calzone, yay alliteration. Does anyone else feel it's slightly off? Like it's trying to be Silver Age, but it's gone so far it's verging on potentially offensive Italian stereotype? Maybe if it had a restaurant, it was called Carlo's Calzones. I'm just thinking about Parks and Rec.
I'm just learning how to make a calzones. Or as you Americans like to say, calzones.
But as a name in 2008, what do you think? Or do you love Carlo Calzone? I clearly like saying it. As for Piero, he's a mime, so he never speaks. He can't say Carlo Calzone. Next, we also have El Sombrero, who is also from Batman 676 and is a Mexican trap master. Yeah, we're definitely trying for some Silver Age homaging, but it's not the same. Also, with the mask, shouldn't he be a luchador or something? They don't really emphasize the hat in the shot here, and the mask seems a bit more distinctive, but then he would just be Bane. But at the same time, if his hat comes off, who is he? Next to him is Scorpiana, who, you guessed it, same issue. Someone just read 676, saw the Villains Club, and went, yes. Scorpiana is an Argentinian assassin, and she's managed to stick around. A few have. Flamingo is pretty active time of recording. Maybe some of them have come back. Time of recording. I have to say it very compulsively sometimes because otherwise things change. We also have Mr. Toad, who debuted in Batman and Robin #1. He works for Professor Pig and is seemingly inspired by Mr. Toad from The Wind in the Willows, which makes my heart hurt a tiny bit. Such a fun, sweet, kind of obnoxious character turned to a life of crime. It was all those cars and boats. They did him in. We also have Swagman, who sadly does not go around swiping swag from media events. He is an Australian robber from, you guessed it, Batman 676. And then we also have King Kraken from you know where. If I missed anyone, let me know, or if you have some definitive characters for those earlier punches, if there are any punchies left out. This episode is clearly a chance to pay a slight nod to the canon at the time running through comics. And it's a fun self-contained endeavor in the style of Generations playing with a future where Batman progresses. It's not the highest stakes out there. And even before the Alfred fanfic reveal becomes clear, it doesn't feel as though this is going to be the future going forward for this universe. From the instant the Joker dies, it's clearly going in a different direction. No, what we're looking at is Alfred's hopes and dreams, which involve the brutal death of Bruce and his wife. Do you think he's got more than one story in that tome? It looked pretty big. You know what they didn't pull from? Robin 3000, because most people forget that that story happened. This episode is an excellent example of how multiple eras and continuities can be pulled from in a way that is cohesive and respects all of them while maintaining the spirit of the property as a whole. It may be more impressive from that standpoint than as an overall episode, as it's fairly standard in other aspects, although again, standout voice acting. However, that predictability may lower it to mid in the eyes of some, or some may not enjoy the changes and shifts from comic canon over to this series, such as Damian's parentage. However, I would argue the changes made make sense and help keep this episode from becoming convoluted or bogged down in aspects of canon it doesn't really play in. It's using canon in the best way, as a springboard and as a foundation, with knowledge and respect, but not being chained by it to the point where other ideas can't be presented. It's having fun with it, which is something this episode is doing overall. Something the series did overall. But those are just my thoughts and I want to hear yours. What did you think of this episode? What do you think of Alfred's fanfic? What future would you write for Batman? We've seen so many at this point. Share all of your thoughts down below. While you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, leave any left out punchies. Let me know which episode you'd like to take a look at next. Thanks so much for taking some of your day spent discussing comics and comic adjacent things with me. I always appreciate it and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.